My name's Jay Smith. As you can tell, I'm not British. Though I've lived here longer than I ever have in America. I've only lived 10 years of my life in America, and I've been here 24 years. All my 3 sons have been brought up here. I was asked to come to the States, to Britain, back in 1992. I grew up in India. My parents are missionaries, my grandparents are missionaries. I come from a huge missionary family. 6 aunts and uncles all over the world who were missions. And so our family's been in India since 1913, so over 100 years. Surrounded by Muslims. My whole life I've been surrounded by Muslims. I used to hate them. I was so glad to leave India. Now I absolutely love them. I think the difference has been because I've got to know them so much better. And I was asked to come here in 1992, really by your embassy, to come and work amongst radical Muslims, because they have very few people that can work with radical Muslims. That's my area of expertise, radical Islam. Let me define terms. Well, let me ask you, what would you say is a radical Muslim? How would you define radical Muslim? Anybody want to venture that one? Any idea?
Someone who takes Islam very, very seriously.
Okay, that's a pretty good way to start. Would you all agree? Takes it very seriously. Probably the best thing to do is just define the word radical. What's the word radical mean in English? It means root. Radical number, a root number. So if you're a radical Muslim, that means you go back to the root. And what would be the root of Islam? What would be their foundations? Muhammad and the Quran. That's it. A book and a man. A book modeled by the man. And if you're a radical Muslim, or really should be, every Muslim should be radical. If you are a radical Muslim, you have to go back to the book modeled by the man. We're going to unpack that a little bit more because of what ISIS is doing. We're going to help you understand who ISIS is and why they're making such an impact on this country, where their authority comes from, and what's our responsibility. But before we get into ISIS, before we get into Boko Haram or Al-Qaeda or Al-Shabaab or any of these other radical groups, let's look at the handout that you have there. Does anybody not have this handout? Okay, we have a few more down here. Yeah. I tell you what, are there any extras? Let's just leave these by the door.
There's loads up there.
And you can be responsible for anybody that comes in this gap. Just do that. Okay, look at the front first page. There's a real problem we have here in Britain concerning how to deal with Islam. I think you're all realizing that. When you hear people like Obama or David Cameron say that ISIS is not Islamic, how many of you agree with that statement? ISIS is not Islamic. None of you. Okay. Now, if I'd asked that question a year ago, most of you would put your hand up. Of course, ISIS didn't exist a year ago. But if I were to say Al-Qaeda is not Islamic a year ago, would you agree with that? 2 years ago. How about before 9/11? Probably all of you would agree with that. There is a change, and it's happening. I think what's going on is many of our politicians will or refuse to accept that ISIS could be Islamic, or that any of these groups could be Islamic. Don't get upset with them. They have to say that, they're politicians. Because of their office, they dare not say that ISIS is Islamic, or any of these groups are Islamic. They would not only have problems with other countries, most every country will pull back their ambassadors, and they would have to apologize publicly. Tony Blair, your former prime minister, I remember he used to get up and he would say, I have read the Quran all the way through, and all I see is peace and tolerance. What Quran do you think he was reading? He's read it 3 times through, and all he saw was peace and tolerance. He was prime minister. He had to say that. If you were to talk to him privately, he would say quite different. Because if you look at the Quran, and have any of you had a chance to look at the Quran? Try to read it, okay? Was it full of peace and tolerance? Did it make much sense? Were there any complete stories? There's one. Only one complete story in the entire Quran. And that's the problem. The vast majority of Muslims you're going to have contact with, doesn't matter where you are, will have never read the Quran. They will not know what's in it. You will probably know more after today about the Quran than they will ever have known. And the reason why is you don't read the Quran to understand it like we do the Bible. You read the Quran to memorize it. And if you're going to memorize it, you don't memorize it in English, you always memorize it in Arabic, in Quranic Arabic, archaic Arabic, very unfamiliar Arabic. There's some seats down here. Come on down here. And on top of that, 85%, shame on you, Johnny, for coming late. 85% of all Muslims in the world do not speak Arabic. Only 15% speak Arabic or read and write it. There is the real problem. So they will not know what the Quran says. But your radical Muslims all have read the Quran. Now let me ask you. Well, I'm going to throw Johnny, you can be my scapegoat today. Johnny, you're a pastor, are you not?
Yes.
And you get up in the middle on a Sunday morning and you preach.
Yes.
And when you preach, do you have something in your hand?
I have a Bible.
Good man, okay. And the people in your church demand you have a Bible, right?
Yes, they do.
And do you open it?
I do.
Do you read from it?
I do.
Do you apply it?
I try to.
There you go. And if you did not have the Bible, you did not read from it, and you did not apply it, would people continue to listen to you?
I hope not.
That's a good answer. I've never heard a pastor say one like that. But most of the congregations will not listen to anybody unless they have a Bible in their hands. Why? Because it's the Bible that is our root, is it not? We go back to the Bible. And who do you model it on? Augustine?
Yes, he's my favourite. No, I'm
John
a fan
Calvin?
of Jesus.
You jumped the gun. Okay,
Oh,
I didn't get to
sorry,
Jesus yet. I think that's a problem. We don't realize that, well, actually, we don't realize just how close we are to Muslims. They always go back to a book called the Quran, and they always model that Quran because it's so hard to understand. Even the Muslim scholars don't understand 20% of it. 20% of the Quran, the best scholars in the world do not understand. It's a huge mystery. So where do you go? How do you apply the Quran? If you look at the Quran, it doesn't say too much on how to walk, talk, eat, drink, sleep. In order to know how to walk, talk, eat, drink, sleep, how to dress, what kind of beard to grow, how to name your wife, if you're going to do that, you don't go to the Quran, you go to what? Who do you go to, actually? Muhammad. But what especially do you go to? For a Muslim, you need to go back to his sayings. That's the Hadith by Al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Ibn Dawud, Tirmidhi. These are the Hadith, the sayings of the Prophet. If you want to know how to live, you need to go back to his biography written by Ibn Ishaq, Ibn Hisham, Al-Wakili. These are the ones that write down the Sirah, the Siratul Rasulullah, which would be the biography, the life of the Prophet of Muhammad. Now we do the same thing, don't you, Johnny? Go back to the Bible. Who do you go to find out how you're to live?
I go to the New Testament.
And where especially do you go to find out how you're to live?
Well, to the Gospels. And
Okay, so that's his life. That's Jesus' life, right?
Yeah.
So that would be the Sirah of Jesus. There's the biography of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The black letter part. The sayings of Jesus, yes, that's there as well. So there's the Hadith of Jesus, would be in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the red letter part, where Jesus actually speaks. But in order to understand the gospel, who do you go to really know how to work it out in Ephesus, or work it out in Philippi, or work it out in Corinth?
Read Paul then.
There you go.
Make sure you got that.
So really to understand how to work with Muslims, you need to really find the parallels that we have in Christianity. And the parallels are there. The difficulty is, we understand that better than anybody else because we start from the same paradigm. Every Muslim, any good Muslim, if they're radical or even if they're nominal or liberal, they should always, always, always go back to the Quran modeled by the Prophet Muhammad. If you're a good Christian, you should always go back to the New Testament. I'm not saying Old Testament now, I'm saying New Testament because that's what we model our lives on, modeled by Jesus Christ. So we also have a book in the man, book in the man, book in the man. And that's something your government doesn't understand. How could they? They wouldn't, because they're not involved in theology. They would not be involved in understanding or even reading the Quran, let alone looking at the Prophet's example. So let's look at the front page, the first page there. There's a real problem of understanding Islam here in the West, and so there has been this dictum that has gone around about multiculturalism. And that's really what our governments want. They want all cultures to be equal. They want all religions to be saying the same thing. And they certainly want to make sure that all religions do come from a premise of peace. So, therefore, Islam, by definition, for any government worker, would be a religion of peace. Have you heard this? Islam means peace. How many of you really believe that the word Islam means peace? Well, you wouldn't know since you don't speak Arabic, do you? Anybody speak Arabic here? What does Islam mean in Arabic? Submission. Obedience. Islam, a fourth form verb. There are 10 forms in Arabic. Salam is a first form verb. Salam means peace, like shalom. But salam is a first form verb. Islam has always been a fourth form verb. And for 1400 years has always meant submission, obedience. A good Muslim is one who obeys. A good Muslim is one who submits. Submits what? To the Quran. Submits to the example of the Prophet. That's what a good Muslim does. Going back to the root. Going back to the base. Al-Qaeda means the base. See, they all are saying the same thing. If you just read the words, if you just unpack who they are, what they represent, you will see they're all going back to the root. Now, your government doesn't understand it. They want to make sure that all religions are saying the same thing. Now, there's a problem. If all religions are saying the same thing, then you're going to have to go back to the text to see if the text says the same thing. And you're going to come up with some difficulties. That's why they don't want you to read the Quran, and they don't want you to go back to the Prophet Muhammad. Zaki Badawi, a proselytizing religion cannot stand still. It can either expand or contract. Islam endeavors to expand in Britain. It hopes that one day the whole of humanity will be one Muslim community, the Ummah, living under a divine law, bringing both government and faith together. The theology of the majority, that's the problem for Islam, because being a minority was never seriously considered or even contemplated when Islam began. And that's true. Islam began in power when it moved up to Medina. When Muhammad moved in 622 to Medina, after 2 years of trying to create a relationship with the Jews, that broke down from 624, the Caliphate was instituted. And that's when the Caliphate, the Islamic State, was then created. And he had 8 years to live to introduce that state, according to Islamic tradition. In the last 8 years of his life, if you want to find a bloody period of any period, read the last 8 years of his life in his biography. It is not pleasant reading. Everything he did was violent. He was involved in 29 battle campaigns personally, planned another 33 on top of that. Look and see what he did to the Jews in Medina in 624, 625, and 627. Throughout the first two Jewish tribes, the Banu Qaynuqa, the Banu Nadir, and the third remaining Jewish tribe, the Banu Qurayza family, he took all 800 of their men in 627, slit their throats, took all the women as concubines, and the children as slaves. Now, you've never heard this before, have you? Yet that's what the Prophet Muhammad did. If you want to find a source for that, go to Ibn Hisham, go to Al-Waqidi, go to Al-Bukhari, go to Sahih Muslim, and go to Al-Tabari. I've given you 5 sources in 3 different genres of literature that you can find that story. This is all well known by my radical Muslim friends. And a growing number of Muslims are reading those stories, because in order to know how they're to live, they've got to go back to those stories. Can you then understand why Al-Baghdadi in ISIS, Al-Baghdadi, do you know this man? Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS, from Iraq. This man has a doctorate, has a PhD in Islamic studies in both theology and history from the University of Baghdad. Can you then understand when he went into Iraq and took over Al-Tafar, came down through Mosul, took over Tikrit? The first thing he did is went up to Tikrit, went and got all the soldiers that were there, and he took them out to the desert, gave them spades, had them dig their own trenches. Why did he do that? And why did he film it? Because that's exactly what Muhammad did in 627 to the Banu Qurayza family. All 800 men were given spades. They dug their own trenches. They stood in front of the trenches, and then he slit their throats, 10 at a time, so they would fall into the trench. Baghdadi did the same thing, filming it all, always with the flag in the background. Take a look at that flag. It has the Shahada. There's only one God but God at the top. And right in the middle, in the circle, and Muhammad is the Prophet of Allah. That's the symbol. That is the signature of Muhammad. The same flag Muhammad used in the 7th century is now being used by ISIS today. Knowing not that you care about it or that your government cares about it, but any Muslim who sees that knows that this man is doing exactly what the Prophet Muhammad did. He's doing it in 2014, like Muhammad did in 627. Take a look at that circle at the bottom of the page. You can see then where the largest religions are. Christianity, so far, we're number 1 in the world. Islam's right behind us with 1.5 billion. It's almost up to 1.8 billion. Some people say it's now over 2 billion. And then Hinduism would be third. But Islam is growing much faster than any other religion. By 2020, it will surpass Christianity as the largest religion on earth. We're talking about just 5 years from now. It will be the largest religion. And it's not growing by conversion. It's growing by biological growth. They have much bigger families. In this country, the average woman has 1.8 children. Don't ask me how. But the average Muslim woman has 2.4 children. So they have much larger families. And the thing about Islam is you are born into Islam. You don't choose it. You don't convert. You are born a Muslim. And once you're a Muslim, you maintain that status for life. You do not leave on pain of death. That's called apostasy. And there are 4 schools of law that all stipulate very clearly who and what happens to the apostate. Look at page number 2. Take a look at that map at the top. These are probably maps you have seen where Islam is around the world. And take a look, by looking at those maps at the top, where do you think the largest number of Muslims are in those maps? Go ahead. Any idea?
Indonesia?
Possibly Indonesia, but what do the maps seem to suggest?
Middle East and North Africa.
That's right. It looks like most Muslims are in North Africa and the Middle East, right? And this is what most people have grown up believing, and this is what the church is teaching. Yeah, take a look at the map down here, in the middle. Where are most of the Muslims? In the Middle East and North Africa? No. The vast majority of Muslims are in Asia. Now, Indonesia is the largest Muslim country on earth, about 200 million Muslims, but not very... They don't tend to be very radical Muslims. They tend not to be very orthodox. There's an amalgamation of Hinduism and Islam and some Christianity in Indonesia. Not really a strong Muslim country as others. The next 3, Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh are the 3 next in line as far as population. Pakistan with about 180 million, India with about 160 million, Bangladesh between 120 and 140 million. You just take those 3 next countries, which all used to be one country before independence in 1947. They were all one country. And you take the Muslim population of those 3 countries, and you get 500 million Muslims right there. By far the largest block of Muslims anywhere in the world. The entire Arab-speaking world, that includes all the Middle East and North Africa, only make up 270 million Muslims. Half of what you find in just those 3 countries I mentioned. So the biggest block of Muslims are in the Indian subcontinent. We go down to Speaker's Corner every Sunday. If you ever come to London, come on down on Sunday and see what we do. Get up on a ladder and we take on 10, sometimes hundreds of Muslims at a time. It's great fun. If you want to have great entertainment, see great theater, come on down to Speaker's Corner. Because we can say anything we want down there. And we do say anything we want. However, what we say there stays there. We don't take it with us and we don't do it anywhere else. Because we can really push their buttons there like we can't anywhere else. It's a great, great environment. But we find that when we engage with Muslims there, we find that Arabs are hopeless, absolutely hopeless at understanding who we are. We just don't appear on their radar. In the Arab-speaking world, it's all right. In the Arab-speaking world, Christianity doesn't make a dent just because we are so small and we just are so insignificant. When you talk to Arabs or people who speak Arabic and you get into a discussion with them, they won't know anything about the Trinity. They won't know anything about the Christology of Jesus. They may know something a little bit about our scriptures, but all they want to talk about is Israel. They want to talk about Iraq. They want to talk about Palestine. They don't want to talk about theology. For them, everything's political. And we're a threat to them because I'm from America or you're from Britain. That's what they want to talk about. If you talk to a Turk, they won't even know what they're supposed to believe. You have to train them and tell them what they're to believe before you can even engage with them. If you talk with someone from North Africa, you pretty much talk about France and the whole colonial experience. Again, political. But if you talk to someone from an Indian subcontinent, anybody from Pakistan, India, or Bangladesh, you know you're going to get into a theological discussion. They get it much quicker than anybody else. More than that, they've had your educational system. More than that, all of them speak fluent English. Impeccable English, because of the British educational system. One of the best in the world. They've grown up with the English educational system. They understand the dialectic. They understand that if there are 2 different theses that are opposed, you get the antithesis, then of course you get the synthesis. And they are willing to do that, and they are willing to engage on almost every theological basis. They are the ones that are attacking our Trinity. They are the ones that are attacking the Christology of Jesus Christ. They are the ones that are attacking the Bible. If you have any doubt, go up on YouTube and just look at the videos up there. Last time we looked, 43,000 videos attacking Christianity. Brilliant stuff. And it all has to do with Jesus and our Bible. What 2 subject would you rather talk about than Jesus and the Bible? And that's why I love having Asians. Now here's the interesting thing is, here in Britain, of the roughly 1.6 to 2 million Muslims that live in Britain, 70% of them are from the Indian subcontinent. Why? Because of the colonial relationship you've had. They all come from the colonial, they're part of the Commonwealth. About 11% are Arab speaking. So the vast majority of Muslims you're going to come in contact here are going to be from the Indian subcontinent. Am I correct? For those of you who have had engaged there. There are some Arab speakers, especially in London, but most of them around in this area are from either Pakistan, India, or Bangladesh. Am I correct on that? You can get into a theological conversation much better with them, not only because they do speak English, many of them have been up on YouTube, they have looked at all these debates up there, and the debaters are all well known. Shabir Ali out of Toronto, Ahmad Didat, who is now dead, he comes out of Durban. There you have Anand Rashid, you have Zakir Naik, he's a big one, out of Bombay. But take a look where they all come from. They all come from the Indian subcontinent. They all speak fluent English. They all have read our literature. They all know our material, sometimes better than we do. And when they come down to Speaker's Corner, they come with Bibles in their hands, not Qurans. And they have these little post-it notes all the way through the Bible with contradiction after contradiction, seeming error and seeming historical anachronisms. Brilliant. They've done their homework on our Bible. How many of you feel like adequate to be able to answer those challenges? That's why I love working with Muslims, because they take you right back to the Bible. And they force you to go back and find the answers. Difficulty is, most of you don't have the answers because you're not trained in this material. There's no school here that trains you how to deal with Islamic apologetics or polemics coming from their end. So that's one reason why we set up Vander Center of Islamics, to help people to learn these kind of answers. Now, let's take a look at the next. Let's look and see where Islam is in Europe. Western Europe, there's about 13 million. France, 4.6. Germany, 3.2. UK, 1.8, anywhere between 1.8 and 2.5. It's hard to know exact numbers. The breakdown, as you can see, 70% are from the Indian subcontinent, and they tend to be at the lower rung socially. 33% of Muslims are under the age of 16. They're very young. Average age is around 28 years. 42% of Muslims live in overcrowded conditions. 12% live without central heating. 62 are unemployed. Lower than any other faith group in Britain. Mostly low-paid sectors of the economy. Interestingly, I don't know if you realize, but last year the most common name for a baby in Britain now is Muhammad. For males, not for females, obviously. 9% of all prisoners are Muslim, yet they only make up 2.7% of the population. So they tend to be underclassed. They tend to be very, very ill-educated, and they do not assimilate very well. They have not assimilated well into Britain, as you well know, as you're seeing almost every day on the news. Groups after groups. Now another family today has now been found trying to get to Syria, trying to leave Britain, trying to join ISIS. A survey was done after 9/11 to see how many of Muslims in this country were radical. And when they did that survey in 2001, right after 9/11, October of 2001, 15% of those who answered, 10,000 people were questioned. 15% claimed to be radical, 70% claimed to be nominal. So the vast majority were nominal in the center. The last 15% were liberal. A year later, they did another survey in 2002, and they wanted to find out the same question, and this group that had been 15% over here had grown to 25%. Now, they did a survey in 2006, and that's the last survey they've done. We're now in 2015, but in 2006, when they asked the same question, not only did they ask, do you support Al-Qaeda, do you support the radical agenda, they wanted to ask, do you support also Islamic law? In other words, would you like to see an Islamic state brought to Britain? Those that answered, over 40%, actually it was 43%, now claimed to be radical. So what had happened between 2001 and 2006? What had happened in the intervening 5 years that had made only 15% grow to 43%, almost half of all Muslims living in Britain? This is what the government and your schools and your pundits are not asking. What has happened? Why this enormous shift towards the right, over here towards radicalism? Almost all taken from within the middle, because there's still about 15% who would still consider to be liberal. And these tend to be academics. They tend to be in our institutions. They're the ones that are on television. Have you noticed? Whenever you see a Muslim on television, they're usually always some doctor before their name. And they're always the ones that say Islam is a religion of peace. But they never quote scripture to support them. Have you noticed that? They never quote scripture to support. Oh, some have tried to use Surah 2, Ayah 2, 5, 6. There is no compulsion in religion. Next time you hear that from a Muslim, ask him to read the rest of the verse. And read the verse that follows it, which is very clear. Those who stand against Allah, great shall be their perdition, for they shall be in hellfire. Now tell me if there's no compulsion. And does that have anything to do with you? There's nothing in that verse that has to do with non-Muslims. It is only for Muslims. Now, they're not going to tell you that. But my radical friends are first to announce that. Surah 2, Ayah 190, they love to go to. That's another verse on peace. If you are attacked, defend yourself, but do not go beyond the limits. And I always ask my friend, okay, what limits are you not supposed to go beyond if I attack you? Look at the next verse. And kill them wherever ye find them. Now, what limits are they not to go beyond once they killed me? Not much of a verse on peace, is it? Probably the favorite verse is Surah 5, Ayah 32. This is the one you hear repeated all the time. He who slays one, it's as if he slays the blood of all. He who saves the blood of one, it's as if he saves the blood of all. Have you heard that one? Over and over again you hear that one. Ask them to read the first part of that verse. O children of Israel, he who takes the blood of one, it's as if he takes the blood of all. Has this to do anything with Islam or Muslims? No. And the reason why, look at the verse that precedes it, 31, which is the story of Cain and Abel. Cain kills his brother Abel, doesn't know how to bury the body, sees a raven scratching in the ground to bury his partner, and it follows the example of the raven. Then the writer of this story then writes, and this is interesting, this was written in the 5th century when a scribe was taking the story and copying it over. In the margin, in his own pen, he writes, oh, if you take the blood of Abel, it's as if you take the blood of all Jews. But if you save the blood of Abel, it's as if you save the blood of all Jews. It was nothing more than an editorial comment written by a scribe in the 5th century. In the late 5th century, that story of Cain and Abel, which comes from Jonathan ben Uzziah, which is an apocryphal, Jewish apocryphal account, was then recopied along with the editorial comment was incorporated into the text. We now know who wrote it. We know where it comes from. We know who the man, even the scribe that wrote it. It has nothing to do with God. It has nothing to do with Muhammad. And it's an editorial comment about the blood of Abel. But then read the next verse, verse 33. And slay them by cutting off their hands and feet on opposite ends and cutting off their heads. Ooh, Now tell me if that's peaceful. You just need to read the next verse. Look at the context. And people, would we do that with our Bible? Just read a half a verse and say, there's our authority? And I ask Muslims all the time, if you really believe that Islam is a religion of peace, show me one verse in the Quran that says you're to have peace with me, a Jew or a Christian. And in 33 years of working with Muslims, I've yet to find a Muslim that can find a verse. It doesn't exist. They don't exist. The only peaceful verses you will find are for other Muslims. For Christians, have nothing to do with the Jews and Christians, for they are friends of one another, and he who is a friend of them is one of them. Surah 5, Ayah 51. Make war on the people of the book. Surah 9, Ayah 29. You want some more? It's not very pleasant for us in the Quran. Yet you keep on hearing this worn-out theme. Islam is a religion of peace. No wonder so many of them are becoming radicalized. Can you see what's motivating them? They're reading the Quran. They're going back to their root. They're doing the same thing that we do, that Johnny does every time he opens up the Bible. He goes back to his root, and we would trust him if he didn't. But thank God we have got a different book. What a different book this is compared to this book. And that's why we spend all our time making sure, and I take this Quran with me everywhere I go, because this is one of the best tools I've got. I just open up and read it for Muslims. I say, this is your paradigm? This is your authority? Have you read the verses about women in here? In Surah 4 and Surah 2, just read the verses about women. Oh, it's not very pleasant for you women. Come on back to this book. It's the bigger one, the better one. I always keep it bigger for that reason, so you know which one is the more important. Let's turn the page, the next one. Homegrown terrorists. Look at that top left picture. There's two men's faces. Do any of you recognize those two men? Omar Sharif on the left, not the actor. Asif Hanif on the right. Asif Hanif used to come down to Speaker's Corner every Sunday. I would be on the ladder, he would be in the crowd. Didn't really get to know him myself, so another fellow on my team got to know him, and he went out to his house for dinner, and met his family, and then suddenly in October of 2002, he disappeared. Never came to the corner, and so we asked what had happened to him. We were told that he'd been sent to Syria to learn Arabic. Pretty good place to learn Arabic. And then suddenly, on April 30th, 2003, these two pictures were on the cover of every newspaper here in Britain. The day before, in Israel, in Tel Aviv, they're on the seafront, there was a bar, Mike's Bar. Inside were 200 people that were dancing. These two young men, both from London, Asaf Hanif, who had got his degree at Kingston University, had his whole life ahead of him, had everything to live for, well educated, lovely guy. Tried to go inside Mike's bar. He was stopped at the door. He pulled the pin on his jacket, blew himself up, and killed 3 Israeli guards. Omar Sharif tried to do the same thing. When he pulled the pin, it was a dud, so he jumped into the ocean and drowned. Do any of you remember this? It was on our newspapers every day, and for about a week, all the newspapers were asking this one question. What were these 2 British Muslims from London doing in Tel Aviv, blowing themselves up? Well, I want to know the answer to that, because we knew Asaf Hanif. He was a friend. Went down to Speaker's Corner that Sunday. No one was talking about it. So I got up on my ladder. It's just a little kitchen ladder, these little A-frame ladders, so you can just put your head above the crowd. And I held their pictures up, and I said, I want to talk about these 2 men. And I sucked all the crowds from the other crowds. And I said, I want Muslims front and center. I want to talk to you Muslims. And I said, how many of you Muslims support what these 2 men did this last week? And about 30 raised their hands. And I said, okay, those of you who have just raised your hands, how many of you would do what these 2 men did? How many of you would be willing to blow yourselves up for your God right here at Speaker's Corner? And about 50 start punching the air, yelling, Takbir al-Rahman al-Rahim. And as they start yelling these phrases out, you could look at the crowd, and I saw the horror on the faces of the crowd. And I said to the crowd, look at these faces. Memorize these faces. This is not a faceless enemy in Iraq or Afghanistan. You've got a problem right here in London. What are you going to do about it? Now that was in 2003. You knew what happened 2 years later, July 7th, 2005. 4 young men came to London, got on 3 trains, 1 bus, blew themselves up and killed 52 people. That's why you have the number 77. 2 weeks later, 5 other young men tried to do the very same thing with 5 other bombs and 5 other backpacks on 5 other trains. Fortunately, only the detonators went off because the material inside the bomb had deteriorated over the intervening 2 weeks. You've heard about the shoe bomber that tried to blow up the airplane. He was from South London, Brixton. The underwear bomber who tried to blow up that plane in Detroit, he was from University College of London. The medical bombers, the 4 medical students that tried to blow up 2 pubs in London and tried to blow up Glasgow Airport, and 1 was killed in the process. Remember the liquid bombers who tried to get on board plane there in Heathrow Airport and try to take liquids to blow up those planes. That's why you can't take liquids on board plane. That happened at Heathrow Airport. The blue water bombers, the Muslims that try to take that fertilizer and blow up blue water, they were all caught. In fact, right now in Belmarsh Prison, there in London, there are 149 of these young men. Every one of them have been found either making bombs, transporting bombs, or blowing up bombs. They're all in prison now, thanks to your security services. Every one of them are Muslim. And all of them, except for 4, are British citizens. You've got a problem. And it's not come from overseas. It's right here. We've got to deal with it. Look at these 2 pictures right here. That's Sheikh Omar Bakri Muhammad. This man has probably done more damage than any other one man here, along with a man next to him. That's Anjem Chowdhury. Do you all know that name, Anjem Chowdhury? CNN loves him. Sheikh Omar Bakri Muhammad is the head of, or the creator of the Al-Muhajirun Party. This is the most radical group here in Britain. I got to know him in 1993 at university, at School of Oriental African Study, and I did an awful lot of work with him. I debated him 4 times. He and I became good friends, and he invited me to come and teach at his school in Tottenham in North London. And the first day I went to teach there in the early 90s, this is how he introduced me. He said, this is my favorite Christian, but this will be the first man I kill when Islam comes to Britain. What an introduction. And yet he was being very honest. I knew exactly what he was saying. We were good friends. And he was being a radical Muslim. He was being consistent to his theology. He was also being consistent to his Quran. Surah 47, Ayah 4. Cut off the heads of the unbeliever. There it is in black and white. I knew this. I knew exactly what he was saying because I've read the Quran. I've studied it for 33 years. It's right there in their own book. And he who participates in jihad, if he should die, great shall be his reward, for he shall be in heaven. Verse 5 and 6. It's right there in the Quran. Just read it. But most of us have never read the Quran. No, most of us don't know what the Quran is saying. Anjem Chowdhury, take a look. Whenever he talks, he gets ridiculed by an awful lot of pundits. But you know, no one can really fault his theology, because everything he says, he sources either in the Quran, or in the tafsir, or he goes to the Sirah, or he goes to the Hadith. He sources everything he says, either in the Quran, or in what we know as the Islamic traditions. That's the Sunnah of the Prophet, the example of Muhammad. Here are some of their posters. They've now created a Sharia zone in where we have our headquarters in
Yeah, we don't need to say that publicly.
okay, we don't need to say that publicly. Anyways, we are there. Doesn't really matter. We're public every Sunday at Speaker's Corner. Some people have tried to come up with some nice jokes at the bottom. Sharia-free zones, or Sharia Halloween costumes. Take a look at that. You cannot criticize Islam publicly, so they've had to use humor to get their point across. Let's look at the next page. What is their agenda? The Islamic structures that are here. 5,000 Quranic schools now all over Britain. 1,200 to 1,400 mosques. It's hard to know because they keep building new ones all the time. Political structures. They come and go. Muslim Council of Britain and is probably one of the strongest groups. FOSIS is the group that controls the university campuses. What we don't have here, and we need to put on here, are the Islamic courts, the Sharia courts. 80 Sharia courts as of 2009. Did you know this? Islamic law is now legitimate. It has been incorporated into British law. So we now have 80 Sharia courts. They want to build 200 new Sharia courts in the next 3 years. We're fighting this tooth and nail because what Sharia courts do to women especially. Now, their jurisdiction is only over that of marriage and divorce. But you can see, that's the thin edge of the wedge. They want to incorporate more and more as the years go on. What is their agenda? Basically, it's these three. The West is in decline. And what they're saying is, if you take a look, you'll see it's in decline culturally. There's a loss of identity here in Britain. People don't even know what it means to be British anymore. Socially, there's a breakdown, a dysfunction in the family. Single-parent moms now everywhere. You can see a discipline in schools with the kids who don't understand anything about authority, a rise in crime. Morally, just take a look at the movies and the internet, the pornography that's rampant in our culture. Spiritually, only 5 to 7% people go to church anymore in this country. That means 95 to 93% are not churched. They may go maybe for Christmas or Easter, and that's about it. Economically, they would say that it is in decline because of capitalism. Capitalism uses usury or interest. By definition, it is anathema in Islam. And politically, the whole idea of democracy stands in opposition to Islam, which believes only in a theocracy, that Allah is at the top. Underneath comes the Caliph, who now would be Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. He is claimed to be the Caliph. Taken from amongst the ulama, which would be the religious scholars, under which comes the ummah, which would be the believers, all Muslim believers, and under that would come the al-kitab, which would be us. We come right under the believers, the Jews and the Christians. And at the very bottom would be the kafirs, the idolaters. That's the hierarchy of the theocratic state. That's what they want to bring to Britain. They want to bring in that model. They will use democracy to do so, as they've done in Algeria, as they did in Egypt. Once they use the democratic process to get the government in, then they will eradicate the democracy and replace it with a theocracy. That's the agenda. And they're doing that in other countries, you'll see. So, the West is in decline in all these areas. Christianity is to blame, they say. And the reason why, I remember the first time I ever heard this thing, I would go, when I was here in 1992, the first thing I did is I go to every one of the Islamic societies I could find on all the university campuses there in London. Imperial College, London School of Economics, School of Oriental and African Studies, King's College, and I would go into the Islamic societies and I would listen to their themes. And you hear these three themes coming up all the time. The West is in decline for every area. Islam is the only religion, Christianity is the religion that is to blame because of our corrupted scripture and because we're just, we're just not relevant anymore. Christianity is no longer relevant. It has no capacity to control all the problems that you see in number A. It's only a one-day religion, only on Sundays, only about 2 hours on a Sunday morning. That's about the only time you ever see Christians or even know that they exist. Therefore, if the West is in decline, if Christianity is to blame, then what's the solution? Islam. Islam's a 24/7 religion. Everything you do, everything you say, how you walk, talk, eat, drink, sleep, all are dictated by the Sunnah of the Prophet, the example of the Prophet Muhammad himself. It's a 24/7 religion. It's the fastest growing religion. and it has answers for every area of life. The next page, page 6. There are many examples of this. If you look in large cities, you will find strong Muslim areas, congregations in Bradford, Burnley. London, we have half of all Muslims live in London. I don't know if you knew that for Britain. 50% of all the Muslims in Britain live in London. So we have them all around us. There's about 1 million of them living in London alone. They really don't have many contacts outside of their community. They do not intermarry very often. They have their halal meat markets. You're seeing them now in prisons, schools, and hospitals. You see them now in my area. All of our KFC, all of our Subways, and now our McDonald's are all halal meat. Even though the majority in my area are Hindus, the Hindus can't even stop it. Hijabs that are worn now in schools. There's example, rather than unpack all of them, let's just continue on to number 9. How do Muslims operate on campus? This is where we are having a real exciting time, because on campus is one of the only places where you can get Muslims to be free to not only investigate their beliefs, but also talk about it and discuss it with you. And they have now talks and debates. They have proselytizing meetings for all comers, Islamic awareness weeks, usually in the springtime. Literature and training days. Go to them. If any of you have a chance, and if you have to go onto your university campuses, go to the bulletin boards and look for these meetings. They're always listed there, and they're open for anybody to come. Go to the meetings, sit right at the front, and in the question and answer period, raise your hands. What you will find is they don't say too much about Islam in almost all these meetings. They spend an awful lot of the times attacking either the West or Christianity. So just raise your hand and say, I'm a Christian. I have some problems with what you're saying. That's not what Jesus did. That is not what Jesus said. Just say that. And you will find that they will make a beeline for you afterwards, and they'll want to get to know who you are, and they'll take you out for dinner. They're lovely. And you may be the first Christian they've ever met. Real Christian they've ever met. And they'll say that to you. Be as passionate as they are. I started doing this when I was here in 1992. And I remember the first time I went, the Muslims there at the Islamic Society, they invited me and said, listen, can we get together once a week? So I said, yeah, let's do that. Let's choose a topic per week. And we met out in Russell Square. And the first time I went there, 6 of them showed up. The next time, 15 showed up. The next time, 30 showed up. In 3 weeks, I had 30 coming down. And I was all alone, and I was overwhelmed. But where would you find Christians doing that? I said, God bless these guys and gals. They have such a passion. And we need to have an equal passion to be able to discuss with them. And all you need to do is just take a subject per week. We'll give you some subjects in a little while. They have a lot of agendas, and what you will find, they call it the cultural mandate. The cultural mandate stipulates that Islam is by far the religion that can eradicate many of the problems. Can we open up that door? I'm feeling awfully hot. Are you feeling hot? Mm-hmm. Get some draft in here. Maybe just put that bin in the doorway now. Get a draft through there. People like Muhammad Abdul Quran Murad, Abdul Maududi, Hamza Chorchis is the guy that's on television all the time. He's a convert. They're looking and showing how great Islam is compared to any other religion, and how great it is compared to atheism. They're saying that Islam will ennoble you. It will there's an awful lot for women there, showing how that Muslim women are much more noble than other women, and that the hijab actually protects you. The jilbab, and the niqab, and the burda, and the chador, all of these protect a woman. And they're absolutely fascinating to go to these meetings and to listen, to hear that. And they just raise their hand and ask some disturbing questions. Just say, well, how you feel ennobled as a Christian. Especially women do this. And see if they can be able to engage with you. Start the discussion going. They talk about the scientific exegesis, that all the scientific technological advances can be placed at the feet of Islam. Islam is at the forefront of science, and they name name after name, claim after claim, all of which are fraudulent. Not one of them is true. But nonetheless, no one ever supposes them. No one ever stands and asks disturbing questions. You do that. Pagan sources of the Bible, they love to attack our Bible and show that almost all the Bible can be traced to other pagan sources. And then polemics. They love the polemics. Who all knows what that word means? Does anybody know what that word means? Oh, good. Well, that's what I am. I'm a polemicist. A polemics is the opposite of apologetics. It's like your football team. You have your offense and you have your defense. The defense in Christianity would be apologetics. Your offense would be polemics, when you go on the offense, when you actually can confront the other. And I'm a polemicist. But see, we don't even use that word anymore in Christianity. Muslims love polemics. That's why whenever you engage with them, whenever you go into a discussion with them, you notice the first thing they do, as soon as they find out you're a Christian, they confront the person of Jesus Christ, they confront the Trinity, they confront the Bible, and all you're given is 2 minutes to defend yourself. And you're always on the defense. Have you noticed that? Do you ever get a chance to go on the offense? Can you? Do you feel comfortable doing it?
Well, I asked the Muslim friend, I said to her, you sure you're going to heaven?
Good one. Do you have an assurance of
And
salvation?
she said, no.
And then where to go from there?
Well, she said that she believed that you had an angel standing next to you and counting all the good things and bad things you do in your life.
Next time that comes up, ask what happens if it's equal when you die.
Yeah, well, that's what I said.
Okay, good on you. We know a man that gave his life to Jesus Christ because his father was an imam. And when he asked, well, if these are the recording angels, they record your good deeds over here, your bad deeds on this side, they're invisible, you're giving them when you're born. And then when you die, they then take the records and they put it on a scale. And if your good deeds outweigh your bad deeds, then you can go across the sit-up bridge over into heaven, into paradise. Only if you make it across the bridge, but Allah can throw you down at any time. So no Muslim has an assurance of salvation. You're correct.
Well, I said, well, Jesus, when you know Jesus, you are sure to be a saint.
There you go. You have an assurance, don't you? Bingo. It's a great one to start with. Now, there is one assurance of salvation in Islam. Do you know what that is?
Killing people.
That's right. Surah 47, Ayah 4.
Jihad.
That's right. Those who participate in jihad, if they should die, great shall be the reward. Surah 4, Ayah 74 says the same thing. There are 2 verses in the Quran that do give you assurance. Bring that up in the conversation next time. Next time. Now, polemics is their area. They love polemics. And the reason why I just opened the Quran, it is full of polemics. Attacking the Christians, attacking the Jews, attacking the pagans, over and over again. And they always go on the offense. And that can be intimidating for an awful lot of Christians. Don't let it be, because it's a great platform. Because they're always going to attack our foundations. They're always going to confront the person of Jesus Christ. Turn to page 7. Now we come to ISIS, Charlie Hebdo, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab. Since ISIS has been on the world stage, it has certainly made it easier for us to ask searching questions and actually be critical about Islam. For the first time, we're finding at Speaker's Corner that people actually agree with us. A lot of people are now agreeing with us because you can no longer get away from the fact that these groups are growing and that they're attracting an awful lot of our youth. And there's something about them that's attracting them. They don't understand why the attraction is. You ask the question. Why do you think so many of these young people are being attracted? Now, some of them are being attracted to the power of Islam. Some of the guys, that testosterone, hoorah, I want to go and fight. There is some of that. But why the girls? Why are so many young girls going over there to be jihadi brides? Where's the attraction in that? And when you get down and talk to them, you will find that most of them, when they talk, the attraction is not the greatness of this one group, although that is there. What attracts them more than anything else is that this group is doing the exact same thing the Prophet Muhammad did. First time in their lifetime where they found a group that actually follows Scripture and follows exactly who Muhammad was and what he did. And they have no allusions to the fact that Muhammad was violent. They're well aware that Muhammad stood against anybody that was against Islam. And their answer is, every other ism, every other belief, every other religion is man-made. Islam is from God. And we are here to submit. We are here to obey. Not shalom. They're very well aware that Islam is not peace. It means submission. It means obedience. They go back to the root. They go back to the root of the word as well.
Can I ask you one question?
Go ahead.
I heard in the radio the other day that it said that ISIS controlled oil fields, right? With $1 million a day from each oil well going out to support the cause, and wheelbarrows or truckloads of American dollars physically being sent out to the front. So it seemed to be implying there was a monetary gain for somebody in terms of what was going on. But is there any truth to that? You know, you hear stuff on the radio, apparently a documentary or whatever on BBC, but
The oil is being sublimated. In fact, much of the oil has dwindled because of the airstrikes. I don't know if you know Baiji, which is the big oil refinery, has now been destroyed by the American military, Air Force, for that reason, to stop that down. Yet they're still growing, and they still have enormous. So where do you think the money's coming from? It used to be oil because they didn't have that oil before they started. How did they begin? And you know where it's coming from?
Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia. And who especially? The Ikhwan. It's coming from the Brotherhood in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a country that is it's a schizoid country. It has two different factions who are at war with each other. You have the Ibn Saud family, which is made up of 5,000 princes, who control the government, but they only get their legitimacy from the Ikhwan, which comes from Wahhabs, the Al-Wahhab, the Wahhabis. And the Ikhwan are the most radical group in the world, and they are the ones that are funneling these millions, billions of dollars to the ISIS, because they support ISIS. But see, how many of you know that? How many of you have been told about the Ikhwan? How many even know about the Brotherhood? Not the Brotherhood in Egypt, this is the Ikhwan Brotherhood. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood, started by Hassan al-Banna in 1920s in Egypt, got his funding from the Ikhwan. So did Said Qutb, Ayman Zawahiri. These are all from the Brotherhood. Ayman Zawahiri, who then joined with Osama bin Laden, who had an awful lot of money, creating Al-Qaeda, the base. So all these groups are supported and funded by the Ikhwan. Okay? So that's where the money is going to come, and it will continue unless we do something about it. Our government doesn't have the will to stop it, because they need the relationship with Saudi Arabia. Let's continue down to Charlie Hebdo. Well, first of all, does any of you have any questions about ISIS that you want me to answer?
I read a really interesting long article about how ISIS is, they have a view of an eschatology, and they think
Graham
that-
Wood.
I'm not sure. But
He's the one that wrote it.
Okay, they think they're leading to this big battle against the forces of the
Dabik.
Rome,
Yeah.
and that's going to bring about the...
Yeah, that's Graham Wood's article. It's a brilliant article. What does ISIS really want?
Yeah.
And it was written in the Atlantic article.
Yeah.
It's 21 pages long.
Yeah.
I have it here. I also have a synopsis of it, because you don't want to read all 21 pages.
Well, I did read 21 pages.
I've got a one-page synopsis. You can get everything he says there, so I can give it to you afterwards. Yeah, what does ISIS really want? And he did a 2-year study just looking at ISIS, and probably has done the best job of looking at the theological position.
Yeah.
They do have an apocalyptic vision that there will be a final battle at Dabik. Dabik is just north of Aleppo, right next to the Turkish border, and that's why they took over Dabik in August of last year, and that's why when Ken Lasik, Ken Lasik, the American that had his throat cut?
Yeah.
Do you notice he had 18 men on either side of him? Had their throats cut alongside him. They were all Syrian military, and they all had their throats cut by 18 individuals who took off their masks, took off their face scarves so they could be seen. You remember that? Happened last October. Did you all see it in the paper? Ken Lasik, who is Abdul Rahman, he became a Muslim, and it still didn't help him. Where did they do that? They did that at Dabik. Why did they do it at Dabik there? There's the symbolism. Because this is where the final battle is going to be, according to the traditions, according to Sahih Muslim. It'll be here that Islam will defeat the Romans. Romans mean the West, because back at the time of Muhammad, it was Byzantine Romans. So it will be here that the final battle will take place. That's why they use that as a symbolism. And that's why they're trying to get America into it, because we are the new Rome, as being the superpower. Now, will that ever happen? I don't think so. But it is hugely popular amongst many of the radicals. They believe that they will defeat the United States and the West, Britain as well, at Dabik.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's what that's all about. Now let's go on to Charlie Hebdo. You're going to have to deal with this, or we're almost finished, so let's not do Charlie Hebdo.
Well, it might be helpful for those from Europe, because a lot of European
Okay.
people have them.
Charlie Hebdo was also a groundbreaking incident in that if you were to talk to Muslims about Charlie Hebdo, they would suggest that not that these men should have been killed, but that Charlie Hebdo should have been shut down because of the ignominy that they had on their covers. We went down to Speaker's Corner the Sunday after that happened. You can go up on YouTube and see what happened. And I put the comics up, I held the comics up for all the Muslims to see. But before I did that, I held up the Christian comics. I wanted to show you the covers of Charlie Hebdo that attacked Christianity. They were absolutely terrible.
Go flying.
What's up there?
Flying,
Oh, yeah, that's Harvey. Follows me everywhere I go. And I put these Christian comics, I just put 2 here. There's about 8 or 10 of them that I held up there. And they're absolutely horrific. Just take a look at that comic with the Trinity there. How do you feel about that comic about the Trinity? Does that bother any of you?
Yeah.
Does that offend you?
Yeah.
And I asked everybody there, does this offend you? It's highly offensive to me. Look at Jesus Christ sitting up on the cross, say, I'm a celebrity, get me down from here. It's funny, but it is very offensive. I said, Muslims, are you offended by these comics? And yes, they were highly offended by these comics. So I said, okay, Christians, this is hugely offensive to us. Should we kill these men who did this comic? No, no, no. Should we shut down this magazine? No, no, no. Muslims? Yes, shut it down. I said, why? Because this is offensive to us. He's one of our prophets. So I said, well, let's look at Muhammad now. So I put up the Muhammad ones. And they got even more angry. But they weren't very bad. There's a picture of I am Charlie Hebdo. That's afterwards. Sorry. This one is probably the most offensive one. That's Muhammad having Jihadi John slit his throat. And he said, I am the prophet, you idiot. And Jihadi John says, shut up, you infidel, to Muhammad. So that is rather funny, but it's also very offensive to Muslims. It's absolutely offensive. So I said to the Muslims, should we kill him? Now, they didn't say we should kill him, but what they did say is absolutely this should be shut down. And you're going to find an awful lot of Muslims would agree with that position. In fact, I would suggest all the Muslims I've met would agree with that this should not have let happen. There should not have been any Charlie Hebdo. There should not have been any abuse. It is highly offensive, and it is wrong to offend any religion, be it Christian or Muslim. And I said, it's interesting that none of the Christians here believe that we should shut this down. Because Jesus is used to being offended. He was offended when he was whipped, had thorns put on his head, and when he was dragged through the streets of Jerusalem with the cross on his back, as he had the nails hammered into his hands, and as he was plunged that spear into his side, how did Jesus react to offense? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That's how we react. We follow our Lord Jesus Christ. Great to be able to do that. You can do the same thing. Show the difference in the way we react to offense to how Islam reacts to offense. Come on down to who can deal with this kind of Islam? Who's going to deal with this group? Well, you say the state is responsible for this. Here's the problem. The state cannot respond to radical Islam, because if you're going to respond and take on radical Islam, you're going to have to take on its ideology. If you're going to take on its ideology, you're going to have to take on its scriptures. You're going to have to take on its foundation, its authority. How do you take on an ideology? With bombs, bullets, and cruise missiles? That's all the state knows how to do. Can any ideology be eradicated using bombs, bullets, and cruise missiles?
No.
Absolutely not. There's not a thing the state can do about Boko Haram. Oh, yes, they can maintain them, and they can certainly bomb their tanks and try to keep them in play. But even if you were to destroy ISIS, don't you think another group would pop its head up again? Don't you think there's going to be many more groups that are jumping to the fore? Especially when you see how many, even in Britain, have moved to the right since 2001. The more you read that book, the more you follow that man, the book and the man, the book and the man, the more you're going to have a problem with radical Islam. So how do you take on that ideology? I would suggest with a better ideology. And who do you think's got the better ideology? You do. We're the only ones that can understand this. We're the only ones that really can take this on. We're the only ones that have the answer, because we do also start from the same paradigm. They start from a book, this one right here, modeled by a man, Muhammad. We start from a much bigger book, modeled by Jesus Christ. Really, this is our battle. This is really our polemic and our apologetic. And that's why I would suggest that we as a church are probably the only ones that really can understand this book, can take it apart, can actually ask the right questions, and we're doing just that. Now, if you look on the last page 9, these are the subjects that we're getting into. These are the subjects we would encourage you to do so. Go up to Muslims and just say, can we have a discussion on the Bible versus the Quran? And let's do a comparison between these two. Now, if you need material, we can send you material on the Bible versus the Quran, especially the newest material that's come up. It's amazing what we're finding on the Quran. We can pretty well destroy the Quran historically now, as of last year. Look at on Jesus versus Muhammad. Jesus wins every time. You compare Jesus and Muhammad, there's just no comparison. Ooh, I love Jesus.
What do you mean you can destroy?
We can destroy the manuscripts now. We pretty much know the dates for the manuscripts. We know all the major manuscripts. Every one of them are written from the 8th to the 9th to the 10th century. Muhammad lived in the 7th century. Not one of the earliest manuscripts is complete, and not one of them is the same manuscripts that we have today. They've all been changed. And they continue to get changed up into the 9th century. We now have films and photographs on all of that. Which means Muhammad had nothing to do with the Quran. Therefore, who's Muhammad? And what's his purpose? Ooh, I love it. You want to see a good debate? I did a debate with Dr. Shabir Ali in Toronto last September on the 27th. go up and just put the classical debate, J. Smith versus Shabir Ali, look at the first 50 minutes. And you'll see all the damage was done in the first 50 minutes. Now, that's more of an intellectual debate. You don't have to go at that level. All you need to do is just open up the Bible and just show what we have in the New Testament and just let them fall in love with Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is so attractive. And Muslims need to hear about him. And they need to know who he is. Go on down with Yahweh versus Allah. Look at Allah and just show what kind of God is in the Quran. He is not the God we have in the Bible. There's no comparison between Allah and Yahweh. And let them fall in love with God in the Bible. Looking at the kingdom of God versus the Khilafah, that's a whole other one, don't have time to unpack that. Women in the Bible versus women in the Quran. Beth and Sarah are experts on this. Have them come in and let them talk to you. They're amazing what they have found on just unpacking the verses in the Quran versus the Bible. Peace and Christianity, that's the best apologetic we have. Because everybody wants peace today. You better not go back to that book and you better not go back to that man. You better come on back to our book. And you better come on back to Jesus Christ. Talk about peace. We've got it. And it's the best apologetic we have because everybody wants peace today. Not even the atheists have a support for it like we've got. Bring him home. Bring him back to Jesus Christ. Relevancy in almost every category. Christianity is more relevant.